Hello students, welcome to our course of Fundamentals of Aviation. So the chapter number 1, we are going to look at the introduction to aviation. So these are the objectives for this topic. So first of all, we are going to look at the history of aviation. So the history of aviation dwells around over 2 millennia, from the earliest innovations like kites and attempts to tower jumping to supersonic and hypersonic flight in powered or heavier than air jet aircraft. So kite flying in China, dating back several hundred years BC, is considered the earliest example of man-made flight. So dating back in 15th century, Leonardo da Vinci created several flying machines and designs incorporating aeronautical concepts, but they were unworkable due to the limitations of knowledge in that time. So also in the late 18th century, the Montgolfier brothers invented the hot air balloon, which soon led to manned flights. And at almost the same time, the discovery of hydrogen gas led to the invention of the hydrogen balloon. So still in the 19th century, especially the second half uh, of that century, experiments with gliders provided the basis for learning the dynamics of winged aircraft. So by the 20th century, advances in engine technology and aerodynamics made controlled, powered, manned, heavier than air flight possible for the first time. So let us look at the early flying machines. So we had tower jumping, and we are going to look at what was used in tower jumping. So since ancient times, there have been stories of men strapping bird-like wings or other devices to themselves and attempting to fly, typically by jumping off a tower. So the Greek legends of Daedalus and Icarus are some of the earliest known. So also others originated from ancient Asia and European Middle Ages. So in the image you can see Daedalus working on Icarus's wings. So earlier flying machines, there were also kites, which is believed to have been the first form of man-made heavier than air aircraft. So it was invented in China, possibly as far as uh, 5th century BC by Mozi. So the evidence to support this finding stands with the material commonly found and ideal for kite building located in China. So there were also man-lifting kites. So man-lifting kites are believed to have been used extensively in ancient China for civil and military purposes, and sometimes enforced as punishment. So an early recorded flight was that of prisoner Yuan Huangtu, a Chinese prince in the 6th century AD. So the stories of man lifting kites can be found in Japan following the introduction of kite from China around the 7th century AD. So for a period, there was a Japanese law against man carrying kites. So there were also rotor wings. So the use of a rotor for vertical flight has existed since 400 BC in form of bamboo copter. So let us look at the beginnings of modern theories of aviation. So this started around 1700, whereby in 1709 Bartholomew de Gusmão approached King John the Fifth of Portugal and claimed to have discovered a way for airborne flight. So due to the king's illness, Gusmão experiment was rescheduled from its initial 24th June 1709 date to August 8th. So the experiment was carried out in front of the king and other nobles in the Casa the India yard, but unfortunately, the paper ship or device burned down before it could take a flight. So these pictures also show the beginnings of modern theories in aviation. So here you can see in 1843, this is an artist's impression of John Stringfellow's plane uh, aerial flying over the Nile. Still in the modern theories of that time, another theorist was a Frenchman called Victor Tatin. So in 1879, he flew a model which, like Pinot's project, was a monoplane with twin tractor propellers but also had separate horizontal tail. So this was the first model to take off under its own power. So also on the right, you can see the first failure of Langley's manned aerodrome on the Potomac River. That was 7th October 1903. Let's also look at aviation in World War One. So this was used through combat schemes. So in combat schemes is where aircrafts were shooting at each other, but any lack of any sort of steady point for the gun was a problem. So the French solved this problem when in the late 1914, Roland Garros attached a fixed machine gun to the front of his plane, and this was the most terrible moment for the enemies. So this is the map of breaking flights of the 1920s. So map of air routes and landing places in Great Britain as temporarily arranged by the Air Ministry for Civilian Flying, and this was published in 1919, showing Hounslow near London. So let us look at World War II. That was between 1939 to 1945, and we see how aviation came into play. So World War II saw a great increase in the pace of development and production, not only of aircraft but also the associated flight-based weapon delivery systems. So air combat tactics and doctrines started being rapidly developed. So also large-scale strategic bombing campaigns were launched, fighter escorts introduced, and the more flexible aircraft and weapon allowed precise attacks on small targets with dive bombers, fighter bombers, and ground attack aircraft. So new technologies like radar also allowed more coordinated and controlled deployment of air defense. So on the left you can see M262, which was a world's first operational jet fighter. So looking at post-war era, that was from 1945 to 1979 after the World War II. So following World War II, commercial aviation expanded quickly, primarily relying on former military aircraft to carry passengers and cargo. So there was an excess of large bombers such as the B-29 and Lancaster, which were easily converted for commercial use. So the DC-3 specifically played a key role, enabling longer and more efficient flights. So in the right you can see DH Comet, which was the world's first jet airliner. So by 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space when he completed a single orbit around the Earth in 108 minutes aboard Vostok 1. So following this, the US also sent Alan Shepard, and also in 1963, Canada became the third nation to enter space with the launch of its first satellite. So the space race culminated in the landing on the moon around 1969. So let us look at the aviation in the digital age. So the last quarter of the 20th century saw a great change of emphasis. So no longer was the revolutionary progress made in flight speeds, distances, and material technology. So this part of the century instead saw the spreading of digital revolution both in flight avionics and in aircraft design and manufacturing techniques. So in the rate you can see Concorde, which uh, flew for uh, 22,296 hours between its first flight in 1976 and its final flight in 2000. So, in the 21st century, aviation has seen increasing interest in fuel saving and fuel diversification, as well as low cost airlines and facilities. Additionally, much of developing world that did not have good access to air transport has been steadily adding aircraft and facilities. Though severe congestion remains a problem in many up and coming nations, so around 20,000 city pairs are served by commercial aviation, up from less than 10,000 as recently as 1996. Also, there appears to be newfound interest in returning to a supersonic era whereby warning demand in the turn of the 20th century made flights unprofitable, as well as the final commercial stoppage of the Concorde due to reduced demand following a fatal accident and rising costs. So these are the references for this topic. So in case you want to understand more, you can go ahead and read these materials. That's all for now. Thank you.